So welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and to not really a scenario as such, but it's going to be a new map that is going to be included in the sort of default list in the multiplayer maps when the new patch releases, and it's a new version of Mountain Pass by WK. It's not replacing the old one, it's just going to be sort of in addition to, and primarily I think the main difference is, as you can see from the mini-map, it's sort of the map is sort of split in half by both of these mountains. So if we just sort of scoot along here, you can see that this is sort of the higher point of the mountains, and some armies can deploy in them. This is a 3v3 of course, and some will be deploying on the plains either side of the mountains. So obviously there are several roads up both sides, so it's going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out. But we'll go through the army compositions now, and we'll sort of talk about the map as it goes along. So first of all, we may as well go through my army, seeing as I'm at one of the sides, and I'm playing as the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. So I've got a couple of units of the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm up here on the cliffside, hopefully giving me some nice overwatch fire down here. And as we move down, we can see that covering this avenue of attack upwards, I've got a couple of units of 3rd Legion Infantry and a couple of units of Sentries of Khazad-dûm as well, so a pike and heavy infantry combination here. So again, hopefully we can get some nice damage, and hopefully the pikes can help keep the enemy at bay. We've also got a couple more units of Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm and my catapult in here sort of sheltered, and they can be deployed where needed, hopefully along my line. And then moving up through here, we can see the other avenue of attack that I'm probably going to have to deal with. I've got a couple of units of 4th Legion Shield Guard, one unit of Mercenary Crossbows. Now admittedly, looking at this map now, I didn't really know what it looked like beforehand, but the Mercenary Crossbows here were a bit of a waste simply because they are kind of trapped in here. I might as well have just gone a unit of axe throwers or something similar, but they still will provide a nice bit of stopping power, so they will still act as a sort of makeshift ranged unit. And then over here we can see the rest of my army, a couple more sentries, a couple more shield guard, and then hidden among here, I wonder if we can see them, there should be the round shields of the Legion bodyguard hidden in here somewhere. I think you can see them, they're just the slightly more heavily armoured guys. The Legion bodyguard, of course, one of the higher tier infantry units of the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm. That's going to be my entire army, nestled here in this mountain pass. I am somewhat cut off from my allies, so that's not great, but the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm are a pretty good defensive faction, so we'll see how they can do in that situation there. So just to my left, Dale will be played by J-Monster, and I think this battle is going to be going up on his channel as well, I'm not sure. But we've got a couple of units of Dalian Marksmen, a very nice arch unit of course. And then as we move back here, we've got the Lake Town Infantry and some Lake Town Pikemen. So they are very cheap and they should be quite cost effective. We'll see how they get along against the opponents we're up against. We've also got a ballista here, hopefully for sniping out enemy siege equipment. That could be quite nasty in these valleys. Some Greenwood Lumbermen, so some lower tier shock troops. The Black Shot Dragon Slayers with their new Windlance bow model. And also I think their sword has been slightly changed as well to be a little bit more detailed. But yeah, the Blackshot Dragon Slayer is obviously one of the very few armor-piercing archers still in the game. Some more Greenwood Lumbermen. Then moving down here, we've also got some more Lake Town units, of course. Always going to be an ever-present in Dale's roster simply because they're very cheap and allow you to pick up some higher tier units like the Girions Paladins over here. So they will be very good at munching through those armoured units of the enemy, as well as some more Greenwood Lumbermen. We've also got some Bardian Marksmen over here with, I think, yes indeed, they have the upgraded unit model, so they've got the cloaks and the slightly more detailed lamellar armour over here, so it's going to be very difficult to take these guys on in a range fight. The Bardian Marksmen are a very, very effective skirmish battle unit. And then we have a couple of units of the Barding Herd, once again the lamellar armour of Dale, and of course the Halberdiers will be very good at dealing with armoured targets. They'll be a very good line holding unit, as in addition to the Lake Town Pikemen that J-Monster has of course. And then right near him we also have Lord of Balagos playing as the Dwarves of Erebor, so the Dwarves and Dale, the classic alliance. So we've got a lot of Ironfoot Spears over here, very good, going to be very good at holding the line, similar to my 4th Legion Shield Guard. He's got the Ironfoot Crossbows of course. Now the difference between Khazad-dûm and Erebor, the most significant one anyway, is that Khazad-dûm have a bow unit and Erebor have the crossbows, so they have a lot more close range punch. And so ironically, we probably would have been better if we'd been in opposite positions here, simply because Erebor with their closer range punch will probably do better in the mountains, whereas over here on the open field, of course, they can be outranged by basically anyone else who opposes them. Over here we've got some Erebor Legionaries, previously known as the Erebor Infantry, of course, a very effective frontline trooper. I think they're slightly better than the 3rd Legion. They're at least sort of the higher tier sword and board units of each faction as they go. We've also got some Dwarven Nobles over here, so they've got their unit model changed to the Ironfoot Guard. At least I think that's... I don't think their unit model card has been upgraded, so I don't really know how they're going to end up in the final version. Got some more Erebor Legionaries here. We've got a couple of units of Axemen of Erebor as well, so some nice armour-piercing shock troopers there. And I think that's kind of it. Well, he's got some Ironfoot Warriors, of course, the main frontline trooper of Erebor. You're going to be seeing these guys in basically any matchup because they are still a very, very cost-efficient frontline infantry unit. I don't think they're the best anymore, though, but they are still going to be an ever-present in Erebor's roster. Then over here we've got some hidden units, so we've got some mercenary cavalry hidden in the woods, and again that's good to have some nice mobility out here on the flanks. So now we shall move on to our opponents. Now first of all, there's bound to be a lot of hidden units for Rhudaur, played by Sin of the Dark Cloud. We've got some Haranadyne nobles over here, and there's bound to be other units hidden in this tree line over here, so there's bound to be all sorts of rangers and other, well, most of Rhudaur's units can hide. Over here, though, we do have the Haranadyne pikemen, so again, a very, very effective pikeman unit, as I've seen in the past. I'm really big fan of the pikemen of Rhudaur. They offer a much-needed, solid centre to Rhudaur, where most of their other units are a little fragile. We've also got some Rhudaur swordsmen. They probably won't make too many inroads against the Dwarven infantry, but they will still at least offer some numbers to the Rhudaur assault. And then we also have the Coltfell marksmen with their not one, not two, but 3 quivers. They've got a lot of ammunition, and you know, they probably do decently against the dwarves simply because they can outrange them. But as soon as the Dalian archers get into range of these guys, they won't stand too much of a chance, of course. But still, lots of ammunition potentially can be firing still into the late game. We've also got some Trollshaw Berserkers, a very nice hybridization of javelins and infantry units. I don't know what they throw, I don't know whether it's axes or javelins, but either way, the premise is the same, of course. Previously, the Rhudaur Berserkers in Gundabad were a very, very effective unit. They aren't quite as good as that in melee anymore, but they are still a very effective melee combatant nonetheless, and I'm not sure if they're AP or not in melee. I know they are at range, of course. We also have a catapult up here on the cliff, so potentially could be used to good effect against the dwarves. The dwarves have got a catapult too, I'm sure of it. I think it might be at the back though. Over here we have some Rhudaur clansmen, so some spears to help hold the line, and the rest of his units are surely hidden, so he's almost certainly got some Haranadyne rangers up on this hillside, and some more units in the trees over there. Meanwhile, if we go to his ally who's in the centre, we have Rune, played by Creed. So he's got some Variag mercenaries, again some sort of basic archers, and as far as cost effective archers go, I think the Variag mercenaries are a bit of a favourite of runic players lately. Going for the cheaper archers of Rune is something that a lot of people do so they can afford the infantry. Some more Variag mercenaries, and then back here we have, of course, the ever present in the runic line, the Loka Flagrim. They're going to be very effective at holding the line and sort of going toe-to-toe with some of the better infantry units of the dwarves. They'll do okay. They won't win, but they won't get slaughtered either en masse. And over here we've got some more Flagrim. And moving up here into the middle, we have some Eastron clansmen with the upgraded unit models, previously of the Swift Blades. Obviously, again, they are lower tier still, so don't expect them to do too much heavy lifting, but they are still very good for low tier units. And then some more Eastron clansmen. Some Scion Rim. The spears are going to be very important for trying to push through the dwarven lines of both myself and Belagost. More myself, though, simply because I am sort of entrenched in the mountains, and they won't be able to win in a straight up fight. And over here we can see the Scion Rim again. More back here we've got some Variag mercenaries, some more Flag Rim, some Camels chosen as well. And if we look over here we've got some Dragon's Wrath crossbows, so hopefully we'll get to see them in action, because we haven't really seen them, well at least I haven't seen them, ever since I started doing the preview stuff exclusively. And then over here we have another catapult from Creed, so he's going to be able to sort of try and fire down onto myself. And then over here finally we have WK, the map maker, playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. He's got the Orc Ballista, which we've already seen is very effective, of course. Heavy Goblin Infantry en masse, Heavy Goblin Crossbowman. He's also got some Heavy Goblin Spears, which are going to be very useful in the mountain pass. He's got some Goblin Infantry as well, which is hidden somewhere. And as we move back here, he's got several units of Heavy Goblin Halberds, which is going to be useful in an elongated fight if it comes to that for him. We've also got some Goblin King's Bodyguard, of course. So that's previously the Orc Bodyguards. Everything that's been renamed has been given a more appropriate name, of course. And then Bolg's Champions and some Snow Trolls, and there's also a unit which he forgot back down here, which is a unit of Black Uruks, but of course there's no real danger of me rushing him down, because obviously I can't really move very well, because the enemy are actually blocking my primary routes off the mountain, so we'll see how this goes, but we shall begin. And indeed we can see that the Orcs are probably going to have to get into melee very quickly, simply because of, you know, in terms of quality, they're not going to have the stuff to break through my lines based on that alone. As we sort of see over here, the Goblin Infantry is going to be leading the way, the fodder hopefully taking the brunt of the initial casualties for him. You can see immediately that the red triangles of both Rune and the Misty Mountains are going to be converging on me, and taking on both armies at once is going to be very difficult. Now fortunately, as the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, I won't get crushed underfoot, because obviously, you know, being forced through the lines is still going to be a viable tactic, particularly when you've got spears like the Scion Rim. But the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm will be able to hold the line perhaps better than most, and I do have the range presence, so they're not just going to be able to rush me down. So hopefully, as I sort of get my units into position over here, you can see the sentries of Khazad-dûm sort of forming our front line. I'll probably have to pull them back though, simply because of the archers. The shield guard will be able to stand against archer fire all day long there. So it's going to be a bit of a rough situation for me to be in, but nonetheless, this is also going to be doubled down on the other side though, because Sin of the Dark Cloud, as we sort of move over here, is going to have to deal with something similar, because again, if both, oh, hello, you can see that the Dwarven catapult spraying down onto the hillside over there, getting a nice hit on the Variag mercenaries. A lot of those archers, and well, a lot of those arrows are going into the hillside there as they're trying to sort of focus fire down Dale. And now that I think they're going to be sort of trying to get a better firing position. But if both Rune and the Misty Mountains try and focus me down exclusively, the same fate is going to meet Sin of the Dark Cloud on the other side. Now, admittedly, he is in open terrain, which is probably going to suit Rhudaur more than it's going to suit Erebor. But even so, it is still something they're going to have to deal with. You can see that the Dalian Ballista is also getting some nice pot shots off onto these Variag mercenaries. Of course, this won't affect the ammunition that they have left, but it will affect the amount of damage they can do per volley. Getting a nice hit on that Rhudaur clansman back there as well. Again, armies just sort of forming up, testing the waters, as it were. These Coldfell marksmen trying to get into more advantageous position, because of course in a straight fight they won't be able to beat the Dalian skirmishers, nor will they survive against the Ironfoot crossbows. And Rhudaur do need to be careful, because in melee they can do a lot of damage very quickly against the dwarves with all of that AP that Rhudaur have in their roster. But one thing they do need to be careful of is the crossbows, because crossbows will be able to tear through a lot of these units, and if they lose too much of their pikemen, the centre of their infantry will not be able to stand against the dwarves will be able to crush them underfoot. Meanwhile, if we sort of go back over into the mountains, we can see that Rune are converging on my position, so heading over the hills we can see that the clansmen, Variag mercenaries and the Scion Rim and the clansmen heading over the hills. I'm sort of getting my Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm into position. I'm going to get some return fire onto them with my shield guard here at the front. I'm going to pull back my pikes, because they're really the only unit in my roster which are super vulnerable to arrows. I mean, the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm aren't great under arrow fire either, but I don't really have much of a choice other than to try and return fire here, and of course kind of fish in a barrel here for that runic catapult. And the Orc Hunter's going to try and return fire. They're not a bad arch unit, honestly, so they should do decently. And the shield guard just sort of forming up a front line. Do need to be careful of the catapult hits, but against the arrow fire the shield guard are going to be able to hold all day long. And then as we sort of move over the mountains, we can see the torches of the goblins sort of in the distance, the mountain orc berserkers as well, with the blackback mountain berserkers. This is one thing that I do have a problem. I do have a real problem here, because I can't commit fully on either side enough to really hold. And the Misty Mountains especially, I mean, a couple of units of 3rd Legion and a couple of units of pikes are not going to be enough to deal with a full assault from the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, especially not the heavy goblin spears at the front. And if the trolls decide to break through my lines as well, that's going to be a real problem for me. And again, it's going to be more of a skirmish fight here until Rune and the Misty Mountains really decide to converge on me. As we sort of move down the hill, we can see that Dale have got their primary position over here. And if we look over here, we can see that the fight hasn't really begun in earnest yet. Erebor and Rhudaur are sort of squaring off against one another as we sort of wait and see how this goes. And there goes the catapult fire. I'm a little concerned actually that this is a little quiet. I'm wondering if that's just my headphones starting. You can see that the Dwarven catapult is going to sort of force Rhudaur's hand a little bit, because if they let that catapult fire continue, their infantry is going to be in tatters by the time they engage both Dale and Erebor, who have formed up part of their armies together. You see that the Dwarven catapult is going to be a very useful tool here. It's also going to be very necessary on the other front where I'm facing the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. Again, another nice hit there. Again, some of these men will actually get up, so the Dwarven catapult is not quite as grossly overpowered as it may first appear. You know, the splash damage that it does is individually a little bit smaller than a regular catapult shot, but potentially it can still do a lot more damage if all of the hits connect, as it were. But it is also something which can induce quite a bit of panic in a player. I mean, that sort of psychological edge that it gives you is honestly perhaps more impressive than the catapult itself. You can see here again, they do scatter off quite a little bit. Again, ineffectual shot there, all of them missing. Rhudaur trying to sort of spread out as much as they possibly can. But you can see these Coldfell marksmen don't really stand too much of a chance against the Bardian marksmen of Dale. Over here again, I think the next 1v1 I'm going to show actually is going to be involving Dale. And over here you can see the mercenary cavalry is actually being committed forward. They do need to be careful though, the granadine pikes are over here. They won't stand too much of a chance in melee against them. Well, if we go back over here as the catapult fire continues, you can see that my orc hunters over here will have a very nice overwatch position over here. I'm trying to get sort of a nice formation going up here to try and make my line last in melee as long as it possibly can. I've got my catapult over here, and hopefully that will be able to do some heavy lifting, provided the catapult plays ball with me. If it doesn't, once it gets some nice shots off, then unfortunately for me, Misty Mountains are going to be able to force their way through just a column of goblins coming down here. And it's really the Snaga skirmishers and the heavy goblin spears which I need to be on watch for most of all. The spears especially, simply because they will be able to push their way through the line. As we sort of see here, the goblin infantry is going to be leading the way, and of course this is not going to be the most important part of the goblin assault. The spears when they get to the front, and the javelins, as the fight commences. So yeah, the sentries of Khazad-dûm and the 3rd Legion infantry will play off against one another very well here. The mass of the pikes is going to be very good for holding the lighter goblins in place, and then the 3rd Legion is just going to be able to butcher them. Again, the battle hasn't really begun in earnest again, as the goblins are sort of struggling to get into position. And this is the first thing that I was quite unimpressed with in this fight. When I was trying to sort of get these units into position, this terrain made it so that instead of sort of forming up along here, they instead decided to just sort of try and burrow their way into the goblin formation, which of course means that these pikes and the 3rd Legion are going to be very ineffective when the vast majority of these goblins get into melee. These units are going to be kind of wasted, unfortunately for me, because they won't get into formation now. Now that they're sort of engaged, trying to get sort of form up over here is not really going to happen too much, and this is really unfortunate for me because I needed every advantage I could get with 2 armies converging on me, and unfortunately that isn't what's going to be afforded to me. But the Khazad Orc Hunters are going to be able to get some nice overwatch fire into this goblin formation, but again it's really the heavy goblin spears that are going to be my biggest problem here, and they are pushing their way forwards, and they're going to be able to barge my pikes, especially now that my pikes are not even in a fantastic formation out of the way. So that's unfortunate for me. As we sort of move into the centre of this engagement, we can see that the skirmish fight over here has gone relatively well for me. So you can see that my formation over here, this engagement hasn't really begun yet. It's going to be waiting sort of for Rune to make the first move, because I can't really attack into the runic position. I don't have the numbers to do that. And as long as Rune has this catapult here, he's under no obligation at all to sort of attack into me, especially not when he's got these heavy goblin crossbows as well. If you have the skirmish advantage, you're under no obligation to attack, and I can't move forward, so they have me right where they want me, essentially. As we sort of move further down, we'll see what's going on down here in the valley. Once again, the engagement down here has not really begun as of yet. And again, the numbers advantage, I feel like pressing the attack against Rhudaur, considering that I'm being overwhelmed, was probably the best thing they could have done here. I mean, it is risky, seeing as Rhudaur do have several units of units that can do a lot of damage very quickly, like the Trollshaw Berserkers back there, but even so, like when one of your allies is being 2v1, you kind of need to make the enemy team suffer that as well. Otherwise you're gonna have a lot more units to deal with in the late game, and it's not like Dale and Erebor here have got the best sort of defensive position they can hold up in for a 3v2 either. They're sort of out here on the open plain, and they're going to be surrendering the high ground essentially to... And you can see actually that the runic infantry has very rapidly engaged me over here. But they're going to be surrendering the high ground to Rune and the Misty Mountains, because I'm not going to be able to win this fight over here. I'm wondering why it's so quiet. I hope my headphones aren't dying. Yeah, you can see that my 4th Legion are going to be trying to hold back the very quick assault of the Flag Rim, Eastrong Plant, and then Scion Rim. I'm going to be rapidly getting my sentries of Khazad-dûm into the fight over here as well. See that once again the frame rate is going to tank when the Misty Mountains and Rune form up their blobs, which is the best way to deal with the Dwarven defences, of course. So I don't begrudge them doing that, but I do begrudge the frame rate, as it's surely going to drop. And that was an Orc ballista shot, and I do believe that the crossbows are also firing into my position over here as well. So I'm getting my sentries into position, and yeah, we can see that the runic line colliding. My shield guard, however, are going to be able to hold long enough for more units to get involved. I've also got my Legion bodyguard, my most elite unit, coming up. I'm trying to get my catapult as well, because unfortunately for me, when I was sort of down here, my catapult just refused to fire at the goblins. The terrain was in the way and it wouldn't move up to the edge. So unfortunately, again, the deployment kind of screwed me there. And then the Blackback Berserkers and the Heavy Goblin Spears able to push their way through my line so easily, because again, was very unimpressed with how my dwarves decided not to sort of set up in the formation I decided, and instead decided to try and burrow into the goblin lines. And this of course means that faster than I would have liked. Again, I was never in a position that was going to be too positive for me in this battle. I was always going to be violently spit roasted regardless of what I did. But I was also to blame for it not really lasting as long as it could have over on this front. Like again, I was a little bit, at this point in the battle I was honestly very disheartened. This is the first scenario that I've been involved in, the first new scenario I've been involved in for a little while, and I was the one that was sort of immediately destroyed right off the bat. So again, a bit morale sapping, but even so, my catapult is going to be able to get some close range shots, but even so, that's going to be basically it for my catapult. They're not going to be able to get much else off. I'm just going to have to throw my mercenary crossbows in. They have been shooting all this time, but even so, they're just going to have to act as a bit of a melee buffer here. And my catapult is not really going to be able to get very many good shots else, because the terrain is kind of shielding them, because there is a bump over here. So again, not great for me. I've sort of tried to... And there goes the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, shooting into my Legion Bodyguard. So again, the Legion Bodyguard was my very elite infantry unit, and they're already just being absolutely dumpstered by the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, so not the best showing by me, again, it must be said. But even so, the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm will hold better than most, so if this was a non-Dwarven faction, I probably would have fallen by the wayside already, but thanks to my sentries and my 4th Legion, I will be able to hold Rune at bay for a little longer. As we sort of move downwards, we can see that the engagement has begun between the Dwarves and Rhudaur. So we have the Axemen of Erebor, the Rhudaur Swordsmen as well. And sort of the Dwarves should have the best of this infantry engagement, but unfortunately, with the Forodrim Axemen sort of wrapping around, you need to fully commit to an infantry engagement if you're going to go for an assault against Rhudaur, and unfortunately it looks like the two waves are sort of separated too much. And you can see that Rhudaur are able to get in and around. Also, these Ironfoot warriors completely surrounded by Forodrim Axemen and Trollshaw Berserkers, so victory is almost a certainty. In a situation where Rhudaur should be facing a 2v1, they're coming out of this engagement far too well for my liking. And you can see over here that the Rhudaur swordsmen holding up very nicely. Again, the Barding Herd are over here as well. It seems like a bit of a disjointed attack over here though, the Dwarves sort of committing forward some of their infantry but not all of it. Rhudaur on the other hand able to get their Hranadine nobles in behind, and that's a very bad sign. They're going to be very lethal. Well, there is a lot of dead horses over here. I would assume that's the mercenaries, probably at the hands of javelin fire. You can see that the mercenaries are coming in here, trying to get in there, but they're also going to get intercepted essentially by Rhudaur clansmen. And of course, melee cavalry is going to be rather ineffectual against spears, and already Rhudaur able to... Rhudaur probably won't win this. They probably will start to suffer at the hands of the Dwarven and Dalian infantry, but they've already managed to pay for themselves. They've already managed to do better in their 2v1 than I am ever going to manage in my 2v1, which could end up being pretty key as this fight moves into the second phase. Mercenary cavalry over here, trying to get a rear charge onto the Forodrim Axemen, but the Forodrim Axemen just trying to sort of silence the crossbows for a little while. And as you can see, Dale are also trying to move up this hill. I think this is Dale anyway. Yes, it is. It's the Barding Herd. Unfortunately, non-shielded units, they're not going to do too well when they're sort of fighting uphill into archers. The Coldfell Marksmen. Also, we have the Greenwood Lumbermen, which have been largely shredded by archers, it would seem. Only 15 of them remain, and they are wavering. I'm surprised they haven't broken, actually, with only 15 men left in the unit. And also, the Rhudaur catapult's still in effect, getting a nice position over here, along with the Coldfell Marksman. And Dale kind of falling back, but the writing's on the wall for us here, simply because they've managed to deal with their 2v1 so much better than we have. And again, I do accept a bit of responsibility for that. My setup wasn't really great. As you can see here, the Scion Rim able to punch through the middle of my lines. Fortunately though, my front with Rune is still holding. And then over here you can see that the Orcs of the Misty Mountains sort of butchering their way through my catapult crew, and then they will be able to rear charge me, and that will be kind of it for my lines over here. My Khazad Orc Hunters still have ammunition over here. Going to be trying to shoot as much as they can into... You can see the Scion Rim are actually shaking over here. They're trying to push their way through into arrow fire. But also now the Blackback Berserkers are into the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm, and of course that means that the Orc Hunters are very quickly going to find themselves totally outclassed in melee. And now you can see the Scion Rim able to get in and around. One unit I was very impressed with was my Legion Bodyguard, simply because they took those essentially 2 volleys of Dragon's Wrath crossbow fire to the face, and they were still able to hold up relatively well. I mean, they are now surrounded. They're sort of sandwiched in between Clansman, Flag Rim and Scion Rim, which they should still honestly probably do pretty decently against. But being surrounded certainly won't help. And the Shield Guard, the Dwarven front line of course was as hardy as you might expect, but ultimately, if I was able to commit more against Rune, I would have quite easily won, but of course the Misty Mountain's able to just absolutely blast through my defence, unfortunately for me. Not great. Meanwhile, for us, we need to hope that down here we're going to be a lot more successful. The Bardian Marksmen are moving up. Over here we can see what's left of this unit of Coldfell Marksmen is sort of still shooting away. And also we have the Barding Herd sort of retreating off the hill. I have to say, Sin did very well considering it was kind of a 1.5 v1 because J-Monster didn't really commit forward all of his men. But I have to say Rhudaur held up extremely well considering they were up against Dwarven infantry. Trollshaw Berserkers now defeat seems certain. Rhudaur clansmen are shaken. Granadine nobles are still alive, I think, in some capacity or other. They might all be dead. The mercenary cavalry still trying to get some cycle charges off. Of course, they are melee cows, so it's not going to be devastating charges. It will still make a difference. And of course, these Axemen of Erebor, they have managed to turn the fight around. The Dwarven infantry, their quality has shown through in the end, despite a bit of a rough first engagement with Rhudaur managing to wrap around. Only 6 Granadine nobles left alive. Those Bardian marksmen retreating off the hillside now because the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are now going to be sending forward some trolls to sort of throw off these Dalian units, and they are actually going to keep going down the hill. Also, I think there are Granadine Rangers up the hill as well. Indeed there are, so that body piercing is going to be pretty nasty, and you can see these Bardian marksmen already the subject of arrow fire, getting torn apart rather, and the trolls are going to be able to finish them off. Although it does look like, based on the fact they've got their swords and shields out, that they are out of ammunition, so it's not the biggest loss, but even so, at this point we really need every man that we can spare to try and put up some sort of last defence. And over here we can see the Barding Herd. The Snow Trolls, of course, not... One thing I have noticed is trolls have gotten an awful lot more durable, at least that's how it seems. I've poured, like, basically the entire payload of a mounted mercenary crossbow ammunition into Trolls of the White Hand, and only one of them died. So trolls are a very potent tool again, although I'm not sure I agree with how potent they've become. I kind of like the fact that they were somewhat fragile shock troops, and well, at least, you know, you needed to support them, whereas now it feels like they could, kind of like vanilla, where they can stand all on their own again. And it's a little bit disheartening to see one of your, like, sort of well-crafted defences just be completely blitzed by trolls. I don't think they should be as strong as they currently are. At least in what I've seen, I've really struggled to deal with them thus far, and that's with stuff like crossbows. So it's not like I lacked the stopping power in these situations. Over here we can see Erebor Legionaries, which were probably the main source of this fight turning around. To be honest with you, the very professional melee infantry is going to be more than a match for the Rhudaur swordsmen, and most of the Rhudaur infantry, the mercenary cavalry, trying to hunt down the Granadine nobles. It was, by the looks of things over there. As we sort of go over to my last stand in the mountains, my ill-fated stand in the mountains. Hopefully in the next scenario, I won't get immediately double-teamed. It is always a bit of a downer when that happens. Meanwhile, over here you can see that this is kind of the last pocket of infantry I have that's putting up a fight, my 4th Legion, and what's left of my Legion bodyguard, which is still in here somewhere. There are only 10 of them remaining, but they're still putting up a fight. My general is still alive, but ultimately this is going to be the last you're going to see of this front over here, because the Misty Mountains, not even sort of stopping to finish me off, they're going to go right on and try and deal with Dale. I did manage to save a couple of units. I got a couple of units of these Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm over here, but that's it. That's all I was able to save. And of course that's my least effective unit in melee, and they don't have ammunition, so not exactly a brilliant save by me. You can see that the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are going to be coming down from 2 avenues of attack onto what is Dale's position now. Don't know how much ammunition J-Monster has at this point. There goes my general. Over here you can see that he's got a lot of Lake Town units left. He's got some Greenwood Lumbermen. He's also got his Girian Paladins, which which, again, very good unit, but we are somewhat outmatched here. We also have the Ballista over here. We're not into the last 10,000 frames just yet, though. We do have these Dalian Marksmen over here. What is going on over here? Bardian Marksman moving forward, going to be reloading as well. What is this? Mercenary Cavalry forming up. There's some more Snow Trolls in the hill over there, so WK... Actually, no, that is the same unit of Snow Trolls. Being warded off by ranged fire. I'm not sure what their shield value is with those tiny little bucklers. Meanwhile, Rhudaur still have that catapult. Actually, no, that's Runic. That's Rune's catapult. So, again, when seeing that I was thoroughly beaten, they saved their catapult ammo, so that's a very wise move. And they're going to be able to get some nice fire onto those Girian's Paladins. I mean, we are in... You know, they have us right where they want us, essentially. Which is unfortunate for us. They have the high ground, they have the numbers at this point as well, which is the most worrying thing. And I think they have the quality as well. I mean, Dale are the only sort of faction that has come out of this with their elites, I think. I mean, I think maybe Erebor still have their Dwarven Noblemen. I think I remember seeing them in the late game. But I don't think we're going to have enough in terms of quality units late on to really make this all that close a fight. But it is a very neat map. I do like the fact that there's a lot of roads in and around the mountains. I wish that I was able to deploy within the mountains a little bit more rather than just in that little corner that I had. I could have deployed entirely on top of the mountains where my Khazad Orc Hunters were, but that would have just meant I would have had to march around and join up with Dale and the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, and then it would have just turned into a field battle. So, unfortunate. And over here we can see that the catapult has sort of held fire. I wonder if it is out of ammunition. We'll see, I suppose, if the battle sort of continues. The Orcs of the Misty Mountains are sort of forming up their troops. Bit of a lull in proceedings at this point. And we can see over here that the Snow Trolls are moving up. They sort of move to ×2 speed, actually, while things... Because, again, it's just a lot of manoeuvring at this point. Mercenary Cavalry, only 2 of them remaining. Oh, we've got the Ironfoot Crossbows that are sort of moving forward a little bit. That's very bold. They're a little bit isolated, and again we've got these Variag mercenaries firing into them, and the heavy goblin crossbows are probably going to be returning fire onto them, so these Ironfoot crossbows probably won't win that fight. Dalian marksman, I'm going to try and help them out. So yeah, Ironfoot crossbows, not really sure what to say. My commentary has been a little juddery in this one actually, and that might be because I was so easily dealt with that it kind of disheartened me, this fight. But even so, this map does deserve to be shown off because it is, again, WK always makes very good stuff, and I'm always pleased to show his maps off. I just wish that I was able to be more of a fixture in this fight. And over here we can see that heavy goblin crossbows are the subject of arrow fire and crossbow fire. I'm not sure what Belegost is doing here, to be honest with you. I mean, he's sending forward his crossbows all on their own, and you know, if you send forward crossbows without infantry support, they are probably going to be charged down. You can see over here that the Snow Trolls are sort of getting into their position again. They're winded though. Only a couple of them have died, so they're still going to be a presence in the late game. So sort of wait and see. Actually, we can see that this sort of red triangle over here, we can see the Bulk champions. I've got my Khazad Orc Hunters down there. And as we sort of move in, I'm being really put off by how quiet this seems. My headphones better not be dying. And over here we can see that the Goblin Infantry is sort of mixing into the ranks. It's really telling that not even the Goblin Infantry was killed by my lines. And over here we can see that the Variag Mercenaries are getting into position even more. What is going on over here? Ironfoot Crossbows, once again, they seem to be sort of moving off all on their own, which is always a bit of a risky thing to do, because if they don't have any infantry support, they're just going to be noticed and they're going to be charged down by infantry. And they are quite far away from the defensive lines of Dale, and Dale is really the only one with a huge army left alive. A lot of the Dwarven infantry was sort of cut down to size. I mean, this is the Dwarven infantry line. They're kind of all over here on their lonesome. They really should be meeting up with Dale, because forming a defensive last stand is really the best we can hope for at this point. And of course, you can see the Coldfell Marksmen, the Hranadine Rangers that were hiding, getting into position. Coldfell Marksmen getting into melee, denying the Ironfoot Crossbows. Well, actually, no, the Ironfoot Crossbows are still going to be able to fire, but even so, being in melee with low tier skirmish is not really what they want. They are able to get some nice hits on the Hranadine Rangers over here. And the Snow Trolls are going to be able to move forward though, and that's going to be kind of the end. And also the Heavy Goblin Crossbows. The Ironfoot Crossbows are going to be surrounded, so again, that's a tool we really needed going into the late game if we were to have any hope of trying to sort of match this up. but without the crossbows we're going to lack a lot of stopping power. Just sort of waiting. This is again one of the tense moments before the main engagement begins. Belagos needs to get his infantry over with Dales. He definitely doesn't need to engage them over here because we need to form up a united front. Admittedly, you know, my contribution to that is not going to be a huge amount. We do have the 2 units of Khazad Orc Hunters over here, but of course, again, they're not bad in melee, not compared to some other skirmishes, but they're certainly not going to be a match winner in this situation. And here we can see we're going to be able to move down to number 1 speed. As we can see, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are going to be moving forward. Again, the amount of casualties I was able to inflict on the Orcs of the Misty Mountains were very, very limited. You can see they still have a lot of halberdiers, you can see they still have black Uruks in the mountains, they still have a decent amount of heavy goblin infantry as well. Like, most of what I killed was heavy goblin infantry and goblin infantry. So not really the kind of thing that's going to sort of sway this fight at all. We've also got some of these greenwood lumbermen over here to try and get some nice close-ups actually as this fight sort of begins. You can see that these black Uruks going over the hill and then stopping. Please charge! Over here the heavy goblin crossbows able to fire, and again they're under no obligation to move forward really. I mean, they could just sit here and shoot us. I mean, unfortunately they're not going to do that because, again, a sense of fun is important for all players. I mean, you can sit there and cackle on your hill and just shoot to death all you want, but you're not really going to engender a lot of respect if you do that. Well, you can see that the Black Uruks are going to be now engaging to these front lines. Black Uruks are going to be a very good choice to send up against Lake Town infantry because they're not AP. They are going to be doing considerably more damage than these Lake Town infantrymen. So again, and that's the primary amount of troops that J-Monster has left that he's going to be using to hold the line, are unfortunately Lake Town units, and against the likes of these Loke Flagrim, more Flagrim as well. So yeah, the quality is in the hands of the enemy at this point, which is saying something when goblins are present on the field. And you can see over here that I had to commit my Khazad Orc Hunters because the goblins were trying to sort of flank around. So my Khazad Orc Hunters will be actually able to beat heavy goblin spears in melee. But one thing they certainly won't be able to beat are these Blackback Mountain Berserkers. Very unfortunate engagement for them over here, but again, just trying to sort of prevent us from being flanked because that really would be just pouring salt into the wound. At this point, if we have a look at the percentages of kills, honestly we're not that far behind, but it's the quality of the troops we have left. I mean, the primary player that has his army intact is J-Monster, and a lot of his line is made up of Lake Town units, which of course are not going to be able to stand up to fear-inducing goblins, especially not when you have a look at the units of quality over here, like the Flagrim victory seems certain. The trolls getting into these Lake Town pikes, they're already shaken of course, and that's going to lead to the collapsing of this line. Once again, the dwarves seem to be lagging behind a little bit. These dwarves need to be engaged in melee. I mean, we can see over here that Rhudaur sort of sweeping around, but it doesn't matter. We need to hold the line together. These units of Erebor Legions and Ironfoot Spears are just kind of sat there doing nothing. And these Dwarven Nobles over here, I mean, we need to use them at this point. I mean, either we allow ourselves to be sort of run over or we die fighting. That's the choice we have at this point. I mean, J-Monster has sort of managed to sort of shore up the line somewhat, but even so, it's not really going to make too much of a difference in the long run. Finally, the dwarves get into melee. Carmel's Chosen were sort of having it all their own way over here for a while there. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen as well. I mean, you can just see that the throwing knives are going to be able to come in here. Horribly outmatched in the end. And it was unfortunate. Again, I really needed to kill more in the mountain pass, and I do accept responsibility for that. But again, being violently assaulted on two ends really did kind of kill the fun of this game for me. And over here you can see that the Bolgs champions are going to be recharging J-Monster's lines, which again, with the Lake Town units, their morale is not going to be able to hold up to the fear that the Bolgs champions are going to be able to induce. The Ballista is also taking damage. The Dalian marksmen are doing their best to fire. But now, all of the advantages are with the enemy, the high ground, the numbers, the quality. And you can see that the Orc Hunters of Khazad over here, they're shaken and they're immediately broken when the Bolgs champions run into them.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Very unfortunate for me there. So that's what's left of my army is now completely gone. J-Monster is really doing his best to hold the line, but ultimately there's a limited amount that you can do with these Lake Town units, especially against sort of the professional units of Rune. So he's got a lot of units of Flagrim. Goblin's King Bodyguard is now also in behind the lines. Girian's paladins sort of running around. Chaos has descended. There's Flag Rim over here. What's this? There's also these Shadow Guards. So they seem to be more and more units of quality just kept appearing out of the woodwork. Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen getting into melee as well. We also have those Dragon's Wrath crossbows. Let's shadow these Dragon's Wrath crossbows. As we sort of see over here. The Haranadine nobles are also still alive. Or Haranadine. Not really sure how to say that still. You can see the Blackshot Dragon Slayers have been trying to get their shots up. Which again, they are a very effective skirmish unit indeed. These Dragon's Wrath crossbows, however, in terms of close range punch, are even more impressive still. The Dragon Slayers against the Dragon Cultists, who will win? As they sort of wind up their shots. I do like the swords of the Dragon's Wrath crossbows as well, those sort of large waved falchions. And there we go. So the Scattershot has now had that fire ammunition added to it, but I don't think they have the fireballs anymore. So I think it is a trade-off, but they are still incredibly powerful. You can see the Blackshot Dragon Slayers almost immediately destroyed, and the Bolgs Champion's able to charge into them as well, and that's going to kind of be the end of the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. You can see that it is kind of just a foregone conclusion at this point. It's just a matter of cleanup. J-Monster is really the only one with much infantry left alive at all. I mean, if we look over here, there's probably still some dwarves left alive. You can see there are some Girian's paladins. Defeat seems certain, though they are utterly surrounded. There aren't actually any dwarves left alive, really. They've kind of just been run over by Rune. So as a sort of post-mortem of this battle, I think we can agree that it was kind of two 2v1s, and then it kind of went into a 3v2 at the end, mainly because Rhudaur were able to weather their 2v1 much better than I was able to weather mine. Again, hopefully in the next custom scenario I get invited to, I won't get so horribly outnumbered and destroyed so easily, because again, part of it was my fault. I mean, I wasn't able to sort of form up a decent formation in a decent position that would have allowed me to make the most of my position. My catapult was refusing to fire at the goblin position, and I tried to move it over to Rune, but of course catapults move very slowly, and by the time it moved over there, my army had already fallen apart. Obviously, Rhudaur did a much better job in his 2v1. He was able to really do very well against the majority. He was able to get a very nice initial engagement against the dwarves as well, as these Bardian marksmen move into melees for their last stand. And again, they didn't have to deal with a lot of Dale's troops either. Dale didn't really commit forwards against Rhudaur, which could be viewed as wise, because we could have been run over even more easily than we were, and they did have a very severe high ground advantage over the enemy. But even so, it was always going to be a bit of a problem for us. I mean, I was very isolated from my allies as well. There goes the Dwarven General, or Dale, of Erebor. And here come the Flag Rim, marching forth. Again, just a matter of clean-up. J-Monster's units did return, to be fair, to give these Lake Town units their due. But of course they are shaken and they're just being butchered by trolls, smashed into smithereens. It's just a matter of all of these units being cleaned up, so we will sort of move up to ×2 speed. Some Haranadine nobles as well. Actually able to break those Lake Town units. We still have just under 3,000 frames left.
Our ally lies dead. Without their general,
there goes the Dalian General.
And flee.
And the reason for that is these Dwarven nobles, which were committed far, far too late. I mean, they were just sort of in the back doing nothing until it was too late. There goes one of the enemy generals, Azog, the Misty Mountains general. So yeah, this is going to be the final engagement. And the reason why this battle took so long at the end was because these Dwarven nobles, these ballistas prevented them from being fully surrounded, so they were able to sort of fight with their backs to the siege equipment. And this allowed them to last much longer than they otherwise would. In fact, let's go up to ×6 speed, simply because this is literally all that remained of the fight. So yeah, this is one of WK's new maps. It's a very good one. I feel like I did a kind of a lackluster job of showing it off here, but again, it was kind of one-sided. But I do feel as though this map does deserve to be shown off nonetheless. And yeah, so again, I used Khazad-dûm poorly, unsurprisingly. And I think in the next battle I will actually discuss a few things with regards to what I'm going to do with the channel moving forwards. Simply because a few things have happened recently, and a few realities have dawned upon me. which lead me to believe that I do need to make a few
Dealt a
changes.
stinging defeat today.
And there we go. So players admitting defeat. I did manage to get the most kills, but most of that was on just trash goblin units, and ultimately the fight for me was decided very early on. It wasn't a fun experience for me, let's put it that way, because I kind of just had to commit my units and then accept that I was going to be destroyed. Very unfortunate. Again, most of the kills from the enemy coming from WK, my army was sort of run over by him, and then he was able to do some nice damage in the late game as well. J-Monster's Lake Town units really crumbled under the pressure that they were put under, but again, unsurprising seeing as they had to deal with all those elites in the late game. One of my Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm getting 400, they did very well across the board, to be fair to them. My sentries just got forced out of the way most of the time. My Legion Bodyguard did very well. My 4th Legion as well did okay. My 3rd Legion unfortunately just got barged out of the way again. That shield wall push, it's not quite as obnoxious as it was in the last patch where most heavy infantry could do it, but even so, the spears are just able to force aside your lines when they've got backup, and unfortunately that was what put me to the sword. But yeah, it was a decent fight. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a classic as we say, but there is going to be one coming up on the official Third Age Reforged channel, I think, which J Monster is going to be doing, which was much more fun, at least for me. And yeah, I think that one, it's also going to sort of unveil some new units for Harad. It's also going to be a sort of standoff for Umbar's old unit models, because they're going to be getting a pretty substantial overhaul. So yeah, I hope you look forward to that, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next as well. And again, I think I'll be making some... I think I'm going to be laying out what my channel's going to be doing in the next video, because I think I need to think about what I've been doing lately, because again, I think the quality of my content has kind of gone down a little bit, as is the quality of my play, and that does concern me a little bit. But yeah, I hope you'll join me for that.